They said the Ottoman palaces were built from dreams and guarded by silence, their marble walls gleaming beneath the moon like frozen whispers of forgotten lives. Yet behind those silks and sapphires, behind the scent of jasmine and the echo of songbirds in the courtyards, there lived hearts that trembled, not from cold, but from fear. Among them was Princess Herimis, the youngest daughter of Sultan Bayezid II, a girl raised in gardens of gold but imprisoned in expectation. She had never walked alone in the streets of Istanbul, never spoken to a man who was not her father, and never chosen a single thread of the silk that wrapped her body. On the day her wedding was announced, the palace bells rang with celebration, but her soul shuddered in quiet rebellion. The air smelled of rosewater and fate, but to her, it was the scent of surrender. For every Ottoman princess knew the same tale, whispered between eunuchs and embroidered in the sighs of handmaidens, that on the wedding night, the princess became not a bride, but a sacrifice. The marriage was not of love, but of politics, not of hearts, but of empires. And the night, when the lamps dimmed, was said to be the test of her obedience, purity, and silence. The fear did not come from the unknown, it came from knowing too much. Herimis had been told since childhood that her life was not her own. A princess was a bridge between kingdoms, a jewel to seal treaties, a dove caged for the peace of men. But in her heart, there burned something untamable, not pride, but compassion. She would sneak away at dawn to the servants' quarters, where women stitched and mended, their laughter thin and tired. She would listen to them, the mothers who had lost sons to war, the young girls married off at 12. Once, she held the trembling hand of a washerwoman whose daughter had been taken by the Janissaries, and in that moment, Herimis realized the truth: fear was not royal or common, it was human. And so, as her wedding night approached, she feared not the groom nor the ritual, but the loss of her own humanity. Her husband-to-be was Pasha Cemaledin, a man twice her age, a soldier decorated by the Sultan for his loyalty and ferocity in battle. Rumor said he had slain 5 men in a single night, rumor also said he prayed for each one. Herimis had never met him, not until the day of their wedding, when he bowed before her, his armor shining like the reflection of fate. He said nothing. Neither did she. The hall erupted in cheers and music, yet both of them were lost in silence, two strangers bound by empire, each wondering what awaited when the doors closed. That night, when the palace grew still and the candles flickered low, Herimis sat by the window in her bridal chamber, trembling like the flame itself. The door creaked open. Cemaledin entered, tall, solemn, his face carved by war and time. He looked at her, and for the first time, she saw not a conqueror, but a weary soul. He bowed deeply, his eyes lowered. "Your Highness," he said softly, "I know what they told you to expect tonight." His voice was neither cruel nor commanding, it was tired. "They told me, too, what I must do. But I have buried too many hearts to wound another." Herimis stared at him, her breath caught between disbelief and hope. He walked to the table, poured 2 cups of sherbet, and handed one to her. "Tonight," he said, "you will sleep in peace. You have been made to fear this night for all the wrong reasons." And for the first time in Ottoman history, or perhaps for the first time in the memory of a frightened bride, the wedding night became not an act of dominance, but of mercy. Cemaledin knelt and removed the golden veil from her hair, as if freeing a bird from its cage. "You are not my possession," he said quietly. "You are the daughter of this empire, yes, but you are also a human being. I will not take from you what fear has already stolen." Tears welled in Herimis's eyes. The silence that followed was not heavy, it was sacred. They spoke until dawn, about the cruelty of power, the loneliness of duty, and the fragile kindness that still existed in broken hearts. When the first light touched the Bosphorus, Herimis whispered, "Why did no one tell me it could be like this?" Cemaledin smiled faintly. "Because kindness," he said, "is the only truth they cannot control." Days turned into weeks, and the palace whispered once more, this time not in fear, but in wonder. The princess and the pasha were seen walking side by side in the gardens, speaking to servants as equals, distributing food to the poor. The Sultan, at first enraged, demanded to know why his daughter behaved as if she were common. Hurrimus knelt before her father, her voice trembling but steady, because, my Sultan, compassion is the crown no one can take from me. Her father said nothing for a long time. Then he turned away, not out of anger, but shame. That night, he looked at the portraits of his ancestors, the conquerors who built the empire through blood, and wondered if perhaps his daughter understood something they never did. As the years passed, Hurrimus and Simoleddin became symbols of quiet rebellion, of love not born of desire, but of respect. Together, they turned their palace quarters into a refuge for orphan children, widows, and scholars who had been silenced for their ideas. They built a school where girls could learn poetry, medicine, and the law of kindness, a school that would be erased from records after her death but whispered about in secret for generations. And though history forgot her name, the legend remained, the princess who did not scream on her wedding night, because her husband had chosen mercy over might. But the story did not end there. One winter evening, many years later, when the empire was beginning to crack under its own weight, a young girl, another princess, the granddaughter of Hurrimus, found her grandmother's journal hidden behind a tapestry. The pages were filled with delicate ink and trembling hands. She read the line that changed her life: fear is born when compassion is forbidden. Freedom begins when kindness is no longer a secret. The girl closed the book and wept. She had been told since birth that a princess must be obedient, silent, perfect, yet here was her grandmother, defying centuries with the strength of gentleness. The next morning, the girl stood before the council of viziers and refused the marriage arranged for her. I will not marry a treaty, she declared. I will marry when I find peace in a man's heart. The court erupted in outrage, but history, once again, began to shift. The words of Hurrimus spread quietly across generations, through servants, poets, and midwives who whispered her story while cradling newborn girls. In time, the legend traveled beyond the palace walls, carried by traders across deserts and seas. And though the empire itself eventually fell, her spirit endured in every act of quiet defiance, every kindness shown in the face of fear. The world changed, not through conquest, but through compassion. Centuries later, historians would find fragments of her letters, censored and hidden away. They would debate her existence, her defiance, her love. Some would say she never lived, that she was only a myth. But others, the dreamers, the storytellers, would say that her story was too human to be false. And in every culture, every time, her message would find new life, that even in the darkest of rooms, a single act of mercy can rewrite the meaning of power. So why did Ottoman princesses fear their wedding night? Perhaps because fear was the first lesson they were ever taught. But Hurrimus taught the last one, that love, when it is kind, is the only power that frees both the ruler and the ruled. Her legacy was not written in gold, but in hearts, in every woman who dared to believe that gentleness was not weakness, and in every man brave enough to choose empathy over command. And though her name faded from the marble and the chronicles, when the moon rose over Istanbul and the sea shimmered like tears, the old palace keepers swore they could still hear her laughter, soft, defiant, and free. It was said that every bride who entered the palace after her carried a hidden hope beneath her veil, that her wedding night, too, would be touched by mercy. And perhaps that is why the story was censored for 600 years, because it reminded rulers that true strength lies not in fear, but in compassion. And so, as history turned its pages, the legend of Princess Hurrimus became a quiet anthem for the human heart, a reminder that even within walls built to contain love, love will find a way to bloom. The empire crumbled, the palaces turned to museums, but her lesson survived the centuries: power without kindness is only fear wearing a crown. And that, whispered the wind across the Bosphorus, centuries later, is why the princesses once feared their wedding night, until one of them dared to dream otherwise.